the C-suite scale, where executive minds unpack the real stories behind business growth. Today I'm joined by Brian Strong, who is the CEO of TenHats. Welcome, Brian.
Well, thank you, Brenda.
Awesome. So excited to have you on the show today. Why don't you just go ahead and give me a brief introduction of yourself and what you do over at TenHats?
Yeah, so TenHats is a managed service provider in Knoxville, Tennessee. Personally, I've been in the technology space for over 20 years now. I started back in like 2004, 2005, and we were in an MSP then. In 2012, I started a software as a service company that focused on public procurement. And then in 2020, I joined TenHats and was promoted to CEO in 2022. And it was kind of funny taking that stint between the first MSP and the second MSP. The company that we originally started with got sold, and so a lot of my friends that were in that company kind of all went all over the place. Every time a company gets sold, the culture changes. And then when as I joined Tin Hats, I started recruiting back a lot of my past coworkers, and it's funny. There was a lot of similarities of the MSP and our methodologies, but the way we went to market has changed quite a bit, and the landscape has changed quite a bit. Specifically, cybersecurity is, on the forefront of most people's minds. And then AI coming into play, and it's funny how the industry changes a lot, but there's things that don't change. And I think one of the things that doesn't change in IT is that it changes a lot. So it's like, so it's always something that we're always continuing to grow and move and have to move in with the times and all the innovation that's going on.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. You mentioned you got promoted to being the CEO in your time so far at Ten Hats. Kind of talk to me a little bit about what that journey's looked like and some of the initiatives that you were tasked to take on to go ahead and grow the company.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I kind of fell into this. It was one of those where I was working on selling Vendor Registry, the software as a service company, and we're about to sell. We went into 2020, and guess what? The pandemic hit, and then the sales slowed down, and so I had this kind of stint period, and I just wanted to do something. I was approached by the company at the time, the MSP at the time. They had a data center, and it was owned by a large healthcare system here locally. It's actually the largest employer in East Tennessee.
Okay.
And so they were just, saying, "Hey, we need help. Can you just help us?" And I was in marketing and sales before, and so I was just like, "Yeah, I mean, I'll be glad to come help and just kind of do something that I know and with people I liked." And once I joined the company, I really figured out that it was not functioning as it should be. So it was one of those where I really started leading in different areas from the standpoint of restructuring the company where it would function and grow. We were in the last 5 years that I've been here. It'll be 5 years, and so that's 4 years. We've grown 600%.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's been really significant growth.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, like I was saying before, is a lot of the methodologies of like how you do things haven't changed. Some of the technology changes all the time, but some of the methodologies of building relationships and really focusing in on what the customer needs are, understanding the business needs. That's kind of one of our fortes, is really understanding business
Mhm.
and then relaying that into, if you understand what the business and the operations of it, the technology typically falls out. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's one of those, recruiting back a lot of the existing team or the old team that I had. And so it's, there's 34 of us, 14 of us have worked together off and on for 20 years. So there's, it's a lot of familiar faces and, long-term relationships.
Yeah. That's definitely what will make a business a well-oiled machine, especially if you guys already know how each other works. So you were able to recognize that and bring in the right personnel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Rehiring people that you know. I mean, the knowledge gap, or it's just a day. It's like, okay, where do you know each other? Just get to work. Where a new person, it does take a while to familiarize yourself with them.
Yeah. Well, 600% growth. I mean, that's definitely something to brag about. So, talk to me. I guess first off, what is your competitive differentiator over at Ten Hats?
So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest differentiator, and it kind of goes back to the first original MSP, is we were business focused and continue to be business focused. Um, I think on the second time too, is we knew what to do, and so there was that confidence of being able to execute and go into certain deals and being able to respond to it and get through the growth. Because I mean, obviously, we've had tremendous growing pains, growing that fast, and really trying to navigate and lead through those. And having that experience in the past has really, you know, you know, um, the CTO and I have worked together for a long time, and we tell a lot of people, they're like, "What's the key to your success?" Is like, well, we know what not to do.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of mistakes in the past. We might be making new ones, but we're not making the same ones we did in the past. So that knowing that has really helped us accelerate the growth for sure.
Okay, that's great. What would you say one of the biggest takeaways is that maybe you had to pivot from or that you learned from along the way?
You know, um, I think one of my biggest journeys was when I was working with a software as a service company. Is that, and it's the entrepreneur's journey, and I've talked about this before. Is like when you're an entrepreneur, you start a company, or MSPs are they're not an exception for this. Is that the person who starts the company, they have to do all functions of the job, right? And so they're doing the billing, they're doing the payroll, they're talking to the insurance people and the accounting and all these things that has to do with, and then all the operations of it too, right? Everybody's looking to you to have all the answers, and you're doing sales and you're doing customer service. And so then you add all these roles, and as the company grows, you need to start shedding these roles. But this entrepreneur's journey is, everybody gets identity from doing these roles. And so there's this, like as you start losing, start shedding these roles, sometimes your identity is affected by, shedding this role because you used to do that. That was part of what you did,
Hmm.
right? And so as I was, working through vendor registry and started shedding these roles, I mean, I did have an identity crisis of like, who am I? I was the guy that had all the answers, and now, I'm just over this section. But then it was, losing those roles and freeing up that time. I was started to be able to do the things that I was most talented at, right? My superpowers of what I did, and coming over to Ten Hats, that was, I had a really good idea of like what I was really good at and what I wasn't really good at. And so I would recruit for the roles that I wasn't good at, and they were, right? And so it's one of those, as I recruited them, I just let them do their thing. And it made me look good because they're really good at that,
Brilliant.
and just kind of get out of their way. And so I think, we wouldn't have the success of Ten Hats if that weren't the case. But it was part of my earlier journey that really prepared me, for this role, and this growth.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like along with that, recruiting and hiring the right people for the role, you probably also got your identity back.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and I do the things that I'm really good at. I mean, there's always a few things that you have to do that, are not in your wheelhouse, but they're fewer and far between, right? And so I get more fulfillment of the job. And then when I go home, I'm still, you know, doing those things that you're not really good at takes a ton of energy, right? And the things that you're good at, you can do it, and it doesn't feel, and it doesn't burn as much energy just because you're natural at them.
Yeah.
And so that's where I can continue to have the energy to do the things that I enjoy, and let other people do what they enjoy. And man, that's a really symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's one of the greatest things that you enjoy being the CEO of Ten Hats right now?
So that's a good question. So I call it it's like my favorite thing, and it's like my greatest strength and my greatest curse. As I live like 6 months to year, 2 years out. Even my wife talks about this too. It's like, well, be having a nice drink or a nice meal, and I'm thinking about the future,
Mhm.
and she's like, we're here, we're having a great time, like be present. And I have the hardest time doing that, but that's also my kind of superpower too, of like looking at the tea leaves of like where the industry is going, how should we be getting there, what's the process to do that. And that and just customer engagement. I love being in front of customers. I love communicating. I love to you know kind of be that uh, out front kind of guy. I don't know why, but it's just kind of who I am. So that's yeah, and having a strong sales background. That's what I did most of my career. It just kind of feels natural.
That's great. That's great. Well, you talked a lot about just seeing where things are going. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about the direction that you're noticing and observing with where the market is going right now?
Yeah, and we've had some conversation before about like cybersecurity and those kind of areas, and where I think the whole industry is going, or the industry is going. I mean, there's several different directions, but one of the biggest areas I think is compliance. And cybersecurity is really driving this from that standpoint of there's attacks that happen every day. I mean, it's not a matter of, you know, if, it's when, right? And so, if you think about 5 years ago, cybersecurity applications were a page or a page and a half, and you could just kind of fluff your way through it. And even the questions were pretty poorly written or, not well defined. Well, today they're 10, 15 pages long, right? So you can see the industry is going that way from that standpoint. We're also seeing where CMMC and for the DoD contractors and subcontractors, they have to comply with these different levels, and I think that's going to proliferate through all of government. Where if you're going to have government contracts, or you could be a sub to a primary contractor. So it could be in the private industry, but if you're working with the government, that you're going to have to comply with these different regulations, and a lot of it hinges around cybersecurity. Do you have the right tools? Do you have the right controls? Do you have the processes? Do you audit the processes? I mean, it's like not just do you have the written policy, but do you have evidence to actually back up that you're really doing that? So, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see there's going to be more scrutiny in how we manage IT all over, and I think it's a good thing, frankly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like it. You're being really proactive with that. So, when you become aware that there's a gap or opportunity that exists, what is kind of your first thing that you do?
Yeah, so for our clients, what we call it is like their security maturity roadmap. And as we walk into a new client, and there we assess where they are on the maturity model, right? And one of the things we try to do is help them along the path. So there's a lot of companies that kind of go into place and go, hey, you need all these tools all at once, or all these different things all at once. And it's a lot of times more than the business can absorb all at one time, right? Because there's processes change, there's culture change, this that goes along with all this, and we agree that, but from their standpoint too, it's they're operating a business, they have to evaluate the risk, and a lot of businesses are willing to take on a certain amount of risk because one of the economics of it, right? And so then they also have competing interest on other initiatives they need to roll out, right? So everybody always wants to be cybersecurity compliant, or be the highest level. They just can't always get there. So we always try to help them with budgeting, and let's get closer, and as quickly as we can. But like, we're not going to force them to get to a place where they just can't afford, or it's a risk for their, from an economic standpoint, a risk for their business. It's always how can we creep up and get to that place over time versus doing it all at one time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like really a phased approach, starting with what the most critical is, and then after
Absolutely.
they're a client, then you kind of layer in additional services.
Absolutely. That's correct.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that's really brilliant. I like that. And so how have you gone about, recognizing what your current clients need and customers need to make sure that you're continuing to deliver and build upon that foundation, but then also make sure that you, even though you've had some hyper growth, continue to acquire new clients?
Yeah. So what we for our existing customers, we have what we call strategic technical advisors, and they're assigned to each one of our accounts. And so they meet with our clients semi-annually, quarterly, some of them even monthly. And what they're trying to do is they're building this roadmap for them on projects that they need, retiring or migrating old systems to new systems, and just continue to stay abreast of all the different things. Is it the Windows 11 migration that has to happen later this year? Is it from the Microsoft stack? Different things of Server 2016. Everybody has to be off that, and then in 2026. Yeah, so all these kind of different things, and those are all security holes, right? From that standpoint, because they're not going to support those systems anymore. And so it's that, and then continuing to look at the posture of the business of like, what is their business doing? We have some clients that used to collect their own credit card information. It was, well, how do we get all that credit card information outside of their walls so there can be PCI compliant? Because going through a PCI audit is very expensive. It's arduous. And so can you mitigate that risk by leveraging, other services that are really good at it and do it all the time? So we're always continuing to do that. And then we do have a sales team that is continuing to go out. It's kind of funny, there was back in 2019, and I started in September 2020, so I'm just going to put that in there. And so in the summer of 2019, when the world was normal, um,
Yeah.
there of the old MSP, there was 21 of us that got together for a dinner, and we talked about if we were ever going to do an MSP again, what would it look like? And it was one of those where we said we wanted between 150 and 200 clients, and then we wanted under 60 employees. We thought after 60 employees there was a culture shift into the environment, and what we want to do is build up to that kind of level. And of course, customers come and go, but if we could kind of stay around that level, so there's always active sales going on and recruiting, but could we be more picky on the clients that we have at that time, and then we really just wanted to service them really well. Our old MSP grew into multiple states, and the culture changed, and we just that was great for the owners that did that, and I commend them for growing a really big business. But we just kind of wanted a really lifestyle company that all of us could really work at, that really enjoyed working together, and we thought that was the biggest play. So we are roughly about 100 clients right now. We're trying to achieve that kind of 150 mark, and then we'll evaluate from there on how much more we want to grow, or do we just kind of want to really serve those clients well. I mean, with 150 customers, there's always something active going on. There's always innovation that needs to happen, and if we could do that for them, that's where I think that it would be a good place to be.
Yeah, I love that you're so focused on a quality customer service. And so you're more concerned about making sure you're giving a good experience to those current customers rather than, having 500, 600 customers that you can't handle
Correct.
and then, thus in turn give them a bad experience. And so it sounds like you're really approaching that intelligently.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And what we feel is from a MSP or outsourced IT company is that we're an extension of their business, right? And so we want to have that really close relationship with them where their success is our success. if they win a big contract, and their business grows, and we can help them achieve those different goals. I mean, we feel like a true partner, and so a lot of our clients have become friends for over the years, and we enjoy that aspect. And that's the other part of it too, is we really focused on just East Tennessee and the businesses in East Tennessee. If the decision is made in East Tennessee, because that's where we live, we want to meet with them eyeball to eyeball, and go to lunch with them, and and just we just think that's critical, for us to be successful and our clients.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that. Well, let's pivot back a little bit to the technology and just kind of the changes that happen. You mentioned compliance is a really big issue. How are you observing and getting ahead of the AI boom going on right now?
Yeah, so that's so we're doing a little bit of it internally. We're growing, I guess our proficiency in AI, and understanding too that AI. I mean, there's AI is such a big term. This the generative AI from the standpoint of the Chat GPTs and the co-pilots and how we use those as tools. And Chat GPT is just a large language model from that standpoint, and it's really good for certain aspects of building job descriptions, or helping with a document or stuff like that. But if you start throwing a bunch of numbers at it, it's not real good. And then also too, from the standpoint of like helping our customers understand data structures too, you know as they start implementing Copilot into their environment. One of the things they always say, I've heard this multiple times, is, hey, we have a lot of data and we want to mine all this data, and if we put Copilot in there, it'll help us learn so much about our business. And I'm like, yes, it will. And I'm at the same time, I'm like, hey, you have documents and all these quotes or whatever they have, proposals, all these kind of different things. Do you want to refer to the ones that were 5 years ago? And they'll go, I mean, no. I mean, we don't want to refer to those because those are outdated. We've changed. Laws have changed. Things that we've implemented, they've changed. And I was like, all that old data is not, you don't want to refer to it in your AI model then, because it'll use that data. You're teaching it using those data sets. And they're like, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're trying to help them bridge the gap of AI it's a very powerful, it's a very good tool, but it needs to be put in a place where it can use the data, the right data, to learn and to help these companies extract the data that they're really looking for. So I think we do a lot of education, more than implementing it right now. And I think except for like co-pilots and the chat GPTs, and we're a big Microsoft shop, so we're looking at the analytics and Power BI. I know that's not really AI, but at the same time is really starting to visualize data, and then they're starting to ask questions on how do I go a little bit further and a little bit further. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. It's a broad question, like you said. I mean, it sounds like just, education around your customers, making sure
Yeah.
you're providing some advice to them while also working to implement some of your own tools.
And I will say, like, actually, it's like for cybersecurity, the tools that are out there right now, they're using points of telemetry and all the. I mean, that's all AI and learning. So those tool sets out there, like that, have been, really changing the environment as well. Most people don't think about them as being AI, but they really are. I mean, because they're looking at behaviors of, these different people trying to break in, and their code sets that they're trying to use to infiltrate these companies. And so that's those are areas of that people don't think that AI is being used every day, and we're heavily using that as well. And then there's also AI for Azure environments and the private cloud, public cloud, from that standpoint of FinOps. all these kind of different things. So those are other areas that we're, using technology heavily from, the more machine learning. That's the machine learning is the area that I am most fascinated by in AI. And not the generative stuff I like, don't get me wrong, but machine learning is that it's just kind of the pinnacle, I think, of AI.
Yeah, awesome. Going back to your passion and kind of where, your expertise is best suited. Great. So you talked a little bit, previously about kind of always thinking, a couple years ahead. What makes you excited for the rest of 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So I think, there's with AI, with all these different platforms out there, specifically Microsoft, I got that word out finally, is that these platforms are really becoming mature. And I'm just using Microsoft as an example. There's there all the Office 365 tools, the Power App tools, there's low code, no code development. Using Copilot, you can do a little development in there. I mean, and then Power BI, all being wrapped together, and so you can start integrating all these different tool sets. And then there's also like the Intunes and you know it's not a Microsoft product, but like Zscaler and all these different ones out there that the you can see that the old IT of a guy coming in and working on your keyboard and have to download all the apps to get a new PC, all that stuff's going away. I mean, you're really going to get a PC, you're going to log in, all your apps come to you, and then you're going to be able to see all the tools and visualize all the data inside of your environment and start asking questions and really getting responsive answers. I mean, I think, it's one of those where, to me, it's like what we think IT should be like is we're finally getting to a place where it's starting to function that way. So it's, IT has always been one of these cost centers and nobody understands and it never works. And, it's propeller heads coming around and fixing stuff. But, a lot of those guys are the ones that actually have put us to this place. But at the same time, now it's going to be kind of touchless as the future goes on.
That does make me really excited the way you explained that. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, I guess, where can somebody reach out to you if they're wanting to connect with you or learn more about Ten Hats and the journey that you guys are on?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is a great place. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And it's just Brian Strong in Knoxville, Tennessee, Ten Hats. You can also go to our website, tenhats.com, and that's TENHATS.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today, Brian, and all your insights that you brought.
Well, thank you, Brenda. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, great. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
All right, bye bye.